It's not unusual for newsmakers to feel the media is out to get them. President Trump has made his perceived slights a daily tweet storm. But more recently, Democratic contender Bernie Sanders has complained about press treatment and, with no irony, says he has a plan to make the media great again. Over the past few weeks, Bernie Sanders has complained about unfair treatment, claiming that the Washington Post has it in for him because he's critical of its owner, Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos.
Anybody here know how much Amazon paid in taxes last year? Yeah. And then I wonder why the Washington Post, which is owned by Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon, doesn't write particularly good articles about it.
Post editor Marty Barron scoffed at that, saying, contrary to the conspiracy theory the senator seems to favor, Jeff Bezos allows our newsroom to operate with full independence. But Sanders is onto something about corporate influence. In an op-ed published by the Columbia Journalism Review, Sanders says, we don't have enough real journalism because many outlets are being gutted by the same forces of greed that are pillaging our economy, pointing to the loss of hundreds of community newspapers and thousands of journalism jobs.
I know you may not like his solutions, but Bernie has hit on some real problems with journalism, no?
Even the folks at Fox think Bernie might have a point. And Sanders says when he is president, he will reform and protect the media, specifically limiting mergers and acquisitions. He also points a finger at Facebook and Google, saying they control 60% of the digital advertising market while publishing stories they steal from other news outlets. Still, do we want government messing with the free press?
You don't have to buy the newspapers. You can turn the channel if you want.
That's another solution. Well, Dan, you're a student of this stuff. What do you think? Is Bernie onto something? And do we want government trying to fix the news industry?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of what Bernie's talking about are common sense reforms that people have been discussing for many years now. I mean, when you talk about ownership caps for broadcast outlets, it's not a matter of no regulation versus regulation. It's a matter of regulation in favor of the corporations versus regulation in favor of the public interest. So that's really not a bad idea. Certainly Google and Facebook need to be brought to heel. It's interesting because this is somebody who really doesn't like journalists. He has feuded with the Vermont media for years, but he seems to like journalism. I wrote about this week for WGBH, and it's a fascinating conundrum. His proposal is pretty solid, I think.
Callie, were you surprised at all, though, that he took on the Washington Post? I mean, that never helps.
No, it never helps. But I mean, it's the same thing we hear from everybody. You know, nobody likes to be covered. Period. It's really what it comes in. And people assume that if they're getting a bad article, there must be some other reason other than it has something to do with me, that person being covered. I think that everybody has the right to bring up legitimate concerns about coverage. That's what we do here, is to dissect that. But come on, Bernie, really?
Yeah,
I mean, come on.
I'm with you. I am among those who say it's just like President Trump on one level. He cannot discern the difference between unfair and unfavorable coverage. If something's not favorable to him, he thinks it's unfair. And he thinks he's special, and he should get favorable coverage. And I just don't think that he understands the difference. Now, I agree with Dan. Some of his common sense proposals, I think, his proposals are common sense. One in particular is when there is a buyout offer for a media outlet, the employees should be allowed to buy the company first before it is sold to an outside. I think that is actually a great idea.
I like his proposal to make it tougher for one company to own, say, a newspaper and a TV station in the same market, or multiple TV stations, because I do think there's a real concern the way we're going right now that you're going to have individual companies dominating what people are thinking about in a given market, and that's problematic. I want to push back a little bit at the idea that it's totally wacky for him to suggest some connection between him going off on Jeff Bezos the way he does and the Post reporting about him. To be perfectly clear, I have a huge amount of respect for Marty Barron. He's done an amazing job at that paper. I don't think that you have Jeff Bezos on the horn calling the newsroom saying, write a hatchet piece about Bernie Sanders. I don't think that's happening. That being said, it is not unreasonable to think that the Post journalists, including the ones who cover politics, will be aware that Bernie Sanders is someone who speaks very negatively about their owner, under whom their paper has thrived, and that in some way, even if it's an unconscious, very subtle way, that there is some impact. I don't think that that's a conspiracy theory.
Everybody talks bad about Jeff Bezos. I mean,
I have to.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people do.
I have to disagree with you about that, Adam. And I would also say that people, in terms of comparing Sanders to Trump in their criticism of the media, I will say that what Sanders had said about the Washington Post and Bezos is pretty much standard anti-press rhetoric. I don't think it goes anywhere near some of the things President Trump has said.
Well, he's not calling the press the enemy of the people.
No,
right?
Or treasonous, or
right,
fake
or
news.
treasonous, or
Exactly.
But he still has a difficulty underndstanding the difference between unfair and unfavorable.
Well, so does Trump.
And so does Trump.
Yes,
and if your point is that we should always, when people complain about it being unfair, we should take a look at that. I agree totally, because
Absolutely.
people have raised issues that need to be brought to the front.